they need. And even though you can say, oh, but they are not accessing the best university in Mexico or the best high school in Santiago de Chile. Yeah, that's true, and they should be able to do it. But from having no access to education at all,
And as you're going through this really very interesting picture, because yes, you cannot have a complete puzzle unless you have all the building blocks. But I was thinking also on comparing the challenges in Latin America to regulating the challenges in Europe. As we know, in Europe, they took the leadership for sustainability legislation and digital transformation as well, actually. And the reason they can act like that, there are a large part of Europe is part of a single bloc, the European Union, and the European Union has recommendations powers over regulations. They are not regulators directly speaking, but every national parliament has to act, or national political system needs to act on the recommendations. But there are sort of mandatory recommendations. And I think when you come to Latin America, the picture is very different because I'm not aware of a bloc similar to European Union. Yes, there are some commercial and economic blocks, but not as strong as unified. How do you cope with that? How do you deal with that? As part of Access Partnership, right? Which is, as you said, a group of senior advisors to governments and politicians.
yeah, no, absolutely. That's one of the areas we help our clients with, and something that I learned when I was in uni once. One of my professors said, you have always keep in mind that in behind a risk or a failure, there's an opportunity. Always, 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 everywhere. And for Latin America, even though we don't have this same level of international or regional harmonization that in terms of, for instance, regulation as in Europe, we still have this community and regional sense. And you can see always that Mexican, Brazilian, Peruvian, Colombian authorities keep informed conversations. They try to exchange recommendations. We advise some governments in the region in terms of digital transformation, regulation, policy making, and usually the way that you can kind of help all these stakeholders in the region is, of course, to prepare everything so that it makes sense for the Latin American context, because it makes no sense to just replicate what worked in Japan, in South Korea, in Europe, even in the US. You say, okay, this is the way that they did it. How can we make it work for Latin America? And how can, and that's one of the things you said in the beginning. Latin America is is the sum of lots of different countries with lots of different situations, but it's possible, and we have done that, and we are doing it with lots of our clients. We're making sense of the best practices of all regions and the lessons learned, and we adopt that so that it actually benefits Latin American countries, and authorities and our clients really rate this highly, because that's the challenge, that's the opportunity behind the risk or the yeah. And then I think dynamism, everything changes in Latin America, and the picture you take today of any given country, and you go in 1 year, different president, different Congress, you had a coup, we had a failed coup like 2 weeks ago in Bolivia, but also we had last year one in Ecuador, 2 years ago in Peru. So we don't know next year where's the coup going to happen, because chances are we're going to have another coup. So that's the dynamism that Latin America demands from all stakeholders, and we try to keep the pace with all this dynamism to help people benefit from technology, which is the first thing I told you. That's what we want to do, at least in this region.
And, thinking about that and this discussion, actually, the effects of, let's say, the European Union regulations are far-reaching because they touch on the supply chain. As I mentioned at the AKFI, we are looking at this gap between digital transformation and sustainability, and we see it as you describe it, as a whole transformation process. You cannot transform without having electricity. You cannot bring internet and just have connectivity. You need applications and services. You need AI for analytics, for instance, and for supporting many other functions. So when you bring this picture, Latin America, it's already required to be integrated when they supply to European companies doing business in Europe. They are required by the CSRD framework sooner or later to report. So the reporting is over the internet. The internet requires electricity, requires a consistent policy across companies. You have multinationals, especially in the natural resources. I'm thinking Chile in particular, and you have complex economies like Argentina and Peru and Colombia, Argentina and Brazil. I mentioned especially, and Mexico and Colombia. So it's an amazing picture of complexity, but I think there are a certain number of actions that are going to help or help the transformation, accelerate the transformation, at least in these areas of sustainability, because this is a global program. We have United Nations Sustainability Development Goals that pretty much lead everybody. And also, I wanted to bring you. You mentioned a ministerial conference. If you don't mind, send us the details, and I will publish it with this interview and this really amazing discussion we have right now. And and as you mentioned, there are two sides of the coin. There is risk and benefits, right? It's one coin, and you can see transformation risks coming from instance from environmental changes, environmental disasters, which you face every day now. It's impossible to open the news or read the news without hearing about a disaster here and there. To which, by the way, many people don't really pay attention. They come also in the forms of cybersecurity disasters. You know, we faced recently a meltdown of all the applications using Microsoft, and we can see how much this connectivity exists between the world, right? It's no longer a single country can impact. It's global. So going to that, it's maybe we can switch to education. I would like to have you maybe Isabella. I know she's very interested in the digital transformation education, in the sustainability education, and maybe Isabella will have some comments and questions.
Sorry, I know I was keep hitting the wrong button. Oh, sorry. I just think, yeah, the next generation, it's really leading us. I'm sure probably feel the same while working in the government sector and in Latin America area. Anything you can share with us on that sense about how to raising up our next generation and changing the culture, the system in education, especially schools, universities?
Yeah, I think one of the main kind of values in my family has always been education, because we are middle class, and the only way for us to kind of have a role to play in this society was to go and educate ourselves, and that's the only way for us to kind of think of a better future. Because in Latin America, if you have no education, basically you don't have like a bright future. You have to assume what it's given and take what it's given if you have no education. And I think technology, internet, of course, and the digital transformation of education is changing. It's changing this, because in the past only those that could afford education or that were near enough a school could kind of improve their life because of the access to education. Now you can see, and because of the pandemic and because of many changes that we have had in the region, you can see people that are living in poor areas, remote areas, or areas where there's still some violence and some social problems, that are starting to have access to education and starting to have the skills they need. And even though you can say, oh, but they are not accessing the best university in Mexico, or the best high school in Santiago de Chile, yeah, that's true, and they should be able to do it. But from having no access to education at all, to at least starting to understand what's happening in the world, to have a voice and to be able to understand what's happening, not just in your town or in your city, but in the world, that changes everything. And Latin America, in particular, of Chile, Peru, Colombia, youth has started to change the policy agenda. And you can see lots of new people, and you can see, for instance, 3 years ago, we had some of the biggest riots in Chile, and it was because of youth. And one of the main things they were kind of complaining about was education, and fair access to education, and not just, and they and I follow those kind of situations closely, and they said it's not just having more teachers and more classrooms, it's having more justice and connectivity, but also equality, and thinking of what's the future Chile is going to build based on the education the government and the authorities provide to the citizens. I think that's fundamental, that's vital for the development of Latin America, and the digital transformation that everything is kind of experiencing now. I think it's super powerful, and new generations is not just, and just my personal opinion, it's not just about teaching 10 years old how to code and how to use Python, because I mean that's important, but it's also important to teach education, and to have an education that makes sense for whatever they want to do in life, even though it doesn't have to be in technology. It's not like the answer for all the problems in Latin America is technology. No, if they want to be artists, okay, that's okay. But bring an education that enables that kind of development. If you can use technology to bring this education to these people, okay, that's brilliant. But I think that's one of the areas that some governments in Latin America have kind of, I don't know, misunderstood to some extent. You speak, oh, how can you improve education with digital transformation? Teach them how to code. That's the answer. And I don't think that's the answer. For some people, yes, but not for everyone. Where's the artist? Where's the guy that wants to be a footballer, if they want to play baseball or whatever? So I think the future relies on that. We have a very good opportunity. We have improved, but the challenge is still in front of us in terms of improving education for new generations, and maximizing the technology opportunity for all of them.
Thank you, Giuseppe. And actually, I have the opportunity to work with many students, many adult students from Cornell, that are actually taking classes in sustainability and digital transformation. And I can see the need for introducing this kind of education in the, even starting with the high schools, to give the principles, the operating principles. And what I observe is exactly what you said, this narrow focus on, okay, digital transformation is digitalization. Digitalization is coding, right? So if you learn coding, now you know digital transformation. No. If you learn coding, you know coding. To apply it to, let's say, sustainability, you have to understand the three P's, the people, the planet, and the profits of a company, how a company can operate in this more complex environment, for instance. And this is a high demand for this kind of skills that I notice. And I know Isabella is very much also working with startups, and it's looking into the cutting edge, if I may say, of AI and digital transformation. I don't know if Isabella did you observe the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel the same. And I think Giuseppe just trying very hard to tell us the future needs to shape humans instead of shape people who only knows how to code or who are forced to learn to code when they want to become a musician, right? And I'm really touched by that. And I think you have some strong opinion of how the future education should be based on develop personal interest, develop their true passion. We also deal with a lot of students, younger professionals, the next uprising generations in shaping the world in a digital transition period. And what's your advice? What's your recommendations to them based on what you just shared?
Look, I think for people from my generation, and I think, yeah, and I'm 35, so people from my generation, we had to learn how to use a computer because
Mm.
I was born exactly when computers started to spread across the planet. And then it was first you have to learn how to use a computer. It was super expensive, and only the people like with the wealthiest people in the society had the first computers. And then a few years later, it was, oh, okay, now you have to use the internet. So I had to learn how to use a computer and how to use the internet, and I experienced the whole process of internet and computers developing, then the smartphones, and that's a different conversation. Now you can see younger people, my brother and my cousins, oh, you have to learn how to use a computer because it seems that they were born and they already knew how to use it, and they assume that internet has been here forever. One of my youngest cousins, she always says like, oh, but how old is the internet? I was like, no, it's some decades, but it's not like it's like mass spread like forever. Oh, but how you did? She asked, how was it like Instagram like 20 years ago? I said, no, it didn't exist. And I was like, yeah, but what I try to say with these examples is that something very similar is going to happen to their children in a few years. For instance, with AI, it's going to be like, oh, what do you mean? Everything uses AI. Do I have to learn to use AI? No, it's like computers. You now everyone assumes that you can use a computer, that you learn how to use a computer, and that's it. With the future and with people, I think balancing out all these kind of things, it's important. And I think technology is not the destination for social development. It's always the people, the human. All these tools surrounding us, okay, are just tools. And technology wasn't born with the internet or with the semiconductors. It has been here for ages. And that's the most important message that I would give to anyone. Like if we have like any of my cousins watching this interview, it's, it's that. Don't be obsessed by how are you gonna use technology for your life. Think about how you're gonna empower your life, and you will find the tools. If it's technology, for sure it will be there. But if it's taking care of the environment, if you want to go to a rural area, to the sea, to the beaches, to take care of turtles in the Caribbean Sea, okay, that's great, and that's that's what life is about, isn't it? So I think that's the most important thing, to bear in mind of the risk and the benefits, but also in the end, once you turn off your cell phone, it's you. It's not Instagram or the application or whatever. It's you and it's the planet. And that's all that we have. So I think that's the most important thing that I would share with any students and any of the youth that might be watching this session.
Fantastic. Thank you. That was a very powerful ending for this conversation. I'm so glad we came back to this human perspective of everything, to the core of our existence, right? Besides, once we shut down our internet and our device, what we're here for. Thank you so much for the strong ending. And we'd love to have you back for more discussion on your work and everything around the topic. And thanks to our audience as well for taking the time. Make sure you tuning in every week for a new episode of AKFI's Actionable ESG Talk series, where you can gain new perspective on how to mitigate risk and create value by integrating ESG and digital transformation. Thanks again, Giuseppe, and thank you, Manuel. We'll see
Thank
you
you.
all soon.
Thank you, Giuseppe. Thank you, Isabella.